There are moments in life when time stands still, moments that leave a lasting impression. We all have those pivotal experiences that change us forever, moments of pain, love, loss, and joy. In the midst of these defining moments, there is often one thing that binds us together: family. This is the story of a father's unwavering promise, a promise that would not only change his own life, but would transform the future of his family. It's a story of second chances, of mending broken bonds, and of the power of time itself. Stay with us as we dive into a tale of love, sacrifice, and the eternal gift that holds a family together. Welcome to A Father's Promise, the last chance to keep a family together. Jack Edwards had always been the type of father who would do anything for his children. The weight of the world had rested on his shoulders for as long as he could remember. A single father, working 2 jobs to make sure his kids, Emma and Noah, never went without. He was a hard worker, someone who never took shortcuts or complained. His life revolved around his family, but at what cost? The once strong man was beginning to feel the toll. Each day felt like an uphill battle, each step harder than the last. Jack had spent years laboring away in construction, coming home exhausted, often with sore muscles, aching joints, and a tired smile. His children were growing older, and with each passing year, Jack found himself more distant from them. At the age of 42, Jack had hoped for more, a home filled with laughter, love, and opportunities for his children that he never had. But instead, he was stuck in the daily grind, running in place, working longer hours just to stay afloat. Despite his best efforts, his dream of providing a better life for Emma and Noah seemed more like a distant memory. Emma, at 16, was beginning to question the life she had been given. She had once looked at her father like he was her superhero, the one who could fix anything, who could make anything better. But now, as a teenager, she couldn't help but be embarrassed by their modest living conditions. The small apartment, the worn-out furniture, and the constant struggle for money. It wasn't the life she had imagined. Her friends lived in nicer houses, wore new clothes, and went on vacations that seemed impossible for her family. Jack noticed the shift in Emma. She no longer talked to him like she used to, no longer laughed at his corny jokes, and often retreated to her room with her headphones on, her door closed tight. Noah, at 12, was still a little boy in many ways, but even he had begun to sense that things weren't quite right. His father was never home to play catch or help him with his homework. Jack was always too tired or too busy to give Noah the attention he needed. One night, after another long day of work, Jack sat in the living room, staring at the clock on the wall. The ticking sound seemed louder than ever, a constant reminder of the time slipping away. Emma was in her room, Noah was watching TV, and Jack felt a familiar loneliness in the pit of his stomach. He had worked so hard to give them everything, but it never seemed like enough. The man who had once been so full of life, full of hope, now felt like a shell of himself. His back ached, his hands were rough from years of manual labor, and his heart was heavy with the guilt of not being the father his children deserved. His dream of taking them on vacations, of sending them to college without the burden of student loans, seemed like a fantasy. Instead, Jack had become a man who could barely hold things together. He was stuck in a cycle of survival, with no clear way out. As he stared at the picture of his family on the mantel, the one where they were all smiling at the beach on their last family vacation, Jack felt the sting of failure. He had promised Emma and Noah a better life, but all he had given them was a life of struggle. He had promised to always be there, to support them, but the truth was, he had been absent in all the ways that mattered. Jack sighed deeply, his mind swirling with regret. He wanted to make things right, to be the father he had always promised to be, but with each passing day, it felt like the clock was running out. Jack stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the city below. The lights from the street lamps cast long shadows across the pavement, and for a moment, he felt small, insignificant. How had he ended up here? Was this really all there was for him and his family? He turned back to look at Emma's closed door. It had been weeks since she had opened up to him. Jack missed his little girl, the one who used to sit on his lap and ask him endless questions. He missed the times when Noah would run into his arms, his face lighting up with excitement just to see him. Suddenly, Jack heard the sound of footsteps approaching. Noah entered the room, his small face looking up at his father with a mixture of concern and innocence. "Hey, Dad, are you okay?" Noah asked, standing by the door, his hands shoved in his pockets. Jack smiled softly, trying to mask the pain. "Yeah, buddy, I'm just tired. Long day at work." Noah nodded, but Jack could see the worry in his eyes. His son didn't understand everything, but he knew enough to know that something was wrong. Jack crouched down to Noah's level and placed a hand on his shoulder. "I'm sorry I haven't been around more. You and Emma deserve better, and I promise I'm going to work hard to make things right." Noah smiled up at him. "It's okay, Dad. I know you're doing your best." But Jack didn't feel like it was enough. He had promised to always be there, to be the father they needed. But no matter how hard he worked, no matter how many hours he put in, he couldn't seem to give them the life they deserved. And the weight of that realization crushed him. It had been 2 weeks since Jack's quiet conversation with Noah. Despite his best efforts, nothing had changed. The days blurred into one another, and the nights were long, filled with restlessness. Jack had been juggling 2 jobs, working overtime whenever possible, but it still wasn't enough. Emma continued to retreat into herself, and Noah's concern only seemed to grow. But the real turning point came when Jack received the phone call he had been dreading. It was early in the morning when Jack's phone rang. The shrill sound of the alarm broke through his dreams, but the phone call was far more unsettling. He had just finished his shift at the construction site and was about to go home for a quick nap before heading to his second job when his phone buzzed on the table. The number was unfamiliar, but something in his gut told him to answer. "Mr. Edwards?" a voice on the other end asked. "Yes, this is Jack. I'm afraid I have some bad news. Your father, George Edwards, has been admitted to the hospital. It's urgent. You should come as soon as possible." Jack's stomach dropped. His father, George, had been battling heart problems for the last few years. Jack had been dreading this moment, but somehow he had always pushed it to the back of his mind. He hadn't seen his father much in the last few months. Life had simply been too busy. The guilt surged in his chest as he heard the nurse's voice fade into the background. "I'll be there in 15 minutes, Jack said, his voice shaky. The drive to the hospital was the longest one Jack had ever taken. His heart raced, his hands gripping the steering wheel. His mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, mostly of his father, who had always been a man of strength and pride. George Edwards had always been there for Jack, teaching him how to ride a bike, fix things around the house, and, above all, how to stand tall in the face of adversity. But those days felt distant now. As Jack walked through the sterile hospital halls, his mind was consumed with regrets. Regrets of the time lost between him and his father, of the promises left unkept. He couldn't shake the feeling that he had failed in so many ways, to his children, to his father, to himself. The idea of facing his father in such a vulnerable state only intensified the guilt. When Jack reached the hospital room, he saw his father lying in bed, hooked up to machines. His once muscular frame, which had always been his pride, now seemed frail and withered. The man who had once been a force of nature was now silent, resting, and Jack felt like the weight of the world was on his shoulders. His father's eyes fluttered open as Jack walked into the room, and a faint smile crossed his face. "Jack," George whispered, his voice hoarse. "You came." "I'm here, Dad," Jack replied, trying to swallow the lump in his throat. He pulled a chair next to the bed and sat down, holding his father's hand. "I'm sorry I wasn't around more." George's smile faded slightly, but there was still love in his eyes. "You've been doing the best you can. I know that, son." Jack shook his head, his voice breaking. "It's not enough. I've been so caught up in work. I've missed so much time with you, with the kids. I didn't want things to end this way. I didn't want to lose you like this." "Jack, listen to me," George said, his grip tightening on Jack's hand. "Life has a way of making things hard, but you've done well. You've worked hard for your family, and you've never given up. I see it in you." Jack could feel the tears welling up in his eyes, but he held them back. His father's words were both a comfort and a sting. "I'm not a good father, Dad. I don't know how to fix things. I've made so many mistakes." "Don't be too hard on yourself," George whispered. "We all make mistakes, But the important thing is what you do next. You've been given another chance, Jack. Don't waste it." The words lingered in the air, and for a moment, the hospital room was silent, except for the beeping of the machines and the soft rustling of the bed sheets. Jack sat there, holding his father's hand, feeling a profound sense of loss, but also something else, a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, his father was right. Maybe he still had time to make things right. For the next few hours, Jack stayed by his father's side, talking about the past and about the future. George shared stories about Jack's childhood, about how proud he had always been of him, even when Jack didn't see it. Jack, in turn, opened up about his struggles, about the pressure he had felt trying to balance everything. In that quiet hospital room, Jack realized something. The work, the money, the hours spent away from his family. They didn't matter as much as he had thought. It was the moments spent with the people he loved that mattered, and he had to change. Just before he left the hospital that night, George looked at his son one last time. "Promise me something, Jack," George said softly. "Anything, Dad. Promise me you'll be there for your kids, be the father they need, and don't wait too long to do it." Jack nodded, his heart heavy. "I promise, Dad. I will." As Jack walked out of the hospital, he felt a newfound determination in his chest. His father's words rang in his ears. Don't wait too long. He couldn't wait any longer. He couldn't keep putting off what really mattered. He had to change. The following days after Jack's visit to the hospital were a whirlwind of emotions. He couldn't stop thinking about the promise he had made to his father. Be there for your kids. Don't wait too long. Those words echoed in his mind like a constant reminder, urging him to take action. But despite his resolve, life had a way of pulling him back into its relentless grip. Jack returned to work the day after leaving the hospital, but his mind wasn't fully present. It was as though something had shifted in him, but the weight of his responsibilities still loomed large. He couldn't just leave his job. He couldn't suddenly change everything overnight. How could he possibly balance everything? Work, family, and the time he had promised to give to his kids? His relationship with Emma had been strained for years. They had both lost touch with each other in the pursuit of survival, and now, the realization of what was truly important hit Jack like a ton of bricks. Yet, the road to recovery wouldn't be easy. Emma had distanced herself from him, and Noah, their teenage son, was growing up far too fast. Jack felt like he was losing both of them, but he couldn't sit idly by and let it happen. One evening, after a long day at the construction site, Jack walked into the house, tired and covered in dust. Emma was sitting at the kitchen table, looking at the bills, a faraway look in her eyes. Jack could see the exhaustion in her face, the same exhaustion that he felt every day. She had always carried the weight of their family, just as he had, and yet they were still so far apart. "Hey," Jack said softly, breaking the silence as he set down his work bag. "How's everything going?" Emma didn't look up at first. She took a deep breath, then finally met his gaze. "Same as usual, Jack," she said with a weary tone. "You've been working a lot, but we're still behind on the bills. And Noah, he's not the same anymore." Jack's stomach tightened at her words. He knew Noah had been pulling away from them. The teenage years were hard, but it seemed like the distance between father and son was growing every day. Noah had always been so close to Jack when he was younger, but now it was as if a wall had risen between them. "I know," Jack replied, his voice filled with guilt. "I'm trying to fix things, but it's like every time I take a step forward, I get knocked back 2 steps. Emma stood up from the table and walked toward him. She placed a hand on his arm. "I know you're trying, Jack, but we're running out of time. We're not going to be able to fix this unless we make a real change. Both of us." Jack looked at her, the weight of her words sinking in. He had always known their relationship needed work, but now it felt like they were running out of chances. "I made a promise to my father, Emma," he said quietly, "and I need to keep it. I don't want to lose this family." That night, as Jack lay in bed, he stared at the ceiling, wide awake. His father's words from the hospital came rushing back. "Don't wait too long." He couldn't help but wonder if he was already too late. His father's condition had worsened, and Jack had yet to make good on his promise. The pain of his father's health was compounded by the realization that the clock was ticking in every aspect of his life. The next morning, Jack decided that he would take a different approach. He couldn't keep living like this. He couldn't keep letting work and the pressure of life define his every move. He needed to act. But how? He couldn't simply walk away from everything. His job, the financial responsibility, his obligations. Yet, somehow, he knew something had to change. As Jack left for work that day, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The promise he had made to his father burned in his chest, and for the first time in years, Jack allowed himself to feel that fire. He wasn't sure what the next step would look like, but he knew he had to take it. It wasn't until that evening that the wake-up call truly hit him. Noah had been distant for weeks, but that night, something had shifted. Jack had just finished his shift at the construction site and was about to head out for another night of work when Noah unexpectedly walked into the living room. He was holding something in his hands, and there was an intensity in his eyes that Jack hadn't seen in a long time. "Dad, we need to talk," Noah said, his voice quiet but firm. Jack's heart skipped a beat. "Of course, son. What's on your mind?" Noah paused for a moment before sitting down across from Jack. He stared at the object in his hands, a small, worn-out watch, one that Jack had given him years ago. It was the watch Jack's father had passed down to him, a family heirloom. Jack had given it to Noah when he was younger, and he had worn it proudly ever since. "Noah, what's going on?" Jack asked, trying to read his son's expression. Noah looked up at him with a mixture of pain and understanding. "Dad, I know you've been trying, but you haven't been here. You're always working, and it's like you've forgotten about us. I felt it. Mom's felt it." Jack felt a lump form in his throat. He hadn't realized just how much his absence had affected his family. He thought he was doing the right thing by working hard, by providing, but he had been blind to the emotional cost. "This watch, it's all I have left of Grandpa," Noah continued, his voice breaking slightly. "And I'm afraid that's all I'm going to have left of you, too." Jack sat in silence, the weight of his son's words sinking in. His son, the one he had promised to be there for, was now facing the reality of his father's absence. He had promised Noah, promised Emma, promised his father. And now, it was time to fulfill that promise. With a heavy heart, Jack finally spoke, his voice quiet but resolute. "You're right. I've been blind. But I'm not going to let this family fall apart. I'm here now, Noah. I promise I'm going to fix this." Noah nodded, his eyes filled with a mixture of hope and doubt. Jack wasn't sure if Noah believed him yet, but Jack knew one thing for certain. He wasn't going to wait any longer. The following weeks were a blur of change. Jack had made the decision to turn his life around, but the journey ahead of him wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't just about working fewer hours or being at home more. It was about reconnecting with the people he had taken for granted, the people he had promised to cherish. He needed to show them that he could keep his word. He started by focusing on the small things. Jack began arriving home earlier, spending time with Noah and Emma in ways he hadn't in years. It wasn't just about being physically present. It was about being emotionally available, something that had been missing for so long. The changes weren't immediate, but the cracks in the wall that had formed between them were slowly starting to heal. One evening, Jack decided to take Noah to the same baseball game they had gone to years ago, before life had become so complicated. It had been their tradition, one that Noah had always used. Noah looked up at him, his expression softened by time and understanding. "It's okay, Dad. I know you were trying. It's just, we needed you here." Jack smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Well, I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere." That promise, the one he had made to his father, to his son, and to himself, was finally starting to feel real. Emma had noticed the difference in Jack, too. The change was subtle, but it was there. He wasn't the same man who had buried himself in work to escape the realities of his life. He was present, focused, and eager to make things right. Emma didn't know if she believed it yet, but she was willing to see if Jack could truly follow through on his promise. One evening, after a quiet dinner at home, Emma finally spoke up. "Jack, I've seen you trying. I have. But I need to know, are you really ready to put this family first? Can we build something new together?" Jack looked at her, his eyes filled with sincerity. "I'm not perfect, Emma, but I'll spend every day trying to make this work. I know I've hurt you and Noah, and I'll never be able to fix all the years I've missed, but I promise you, I'll be here from now on." Emma studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable, and then, finally, she nodded. "I want to believe that, Jack. I really do." For the first time in a long time, Jack felt like they were on the same page. He wasn't asking for everything to be fixed overnight, but this was a start, and for now, it was enough. The true test of Jack's resolve came when he was faced with a decision at work. The construction company he worked for had offered him a promotion, a major step up in his career. But with the promotion came more hours, more responsibilities, and more time away from his family. It was a dream job, something Jack had worked toward for years. But now, with everything that had changed, he wasn't sure if the sacrifice was worth it. Jack sat in his truck after receiving the offer, the weight of the decision heavy on his chest. He thought about his father, about his promise, and about what he wanted for his own life. It wasn't just about money or status. It was about the people who mattered most. He picked up his phone and called Emma. "Hey," he said when she picked up, "I got an offer for a promotion. It's a big deal, but it means even more time away from home." Emma's voice was soft on the other end of the line. "Jack, you have to do what feels right, but you've been working so hard already. We've all been waiting for you to be here with us." Jack took a deep breath. "I know, and I want to be here. I don't want to lose the time I have left with you and Noah." He sat there for a moment, the decision becoming clearer by the second. The promotion would have been a great opportunity, but it would have taken him further away from what mattered most. Jack knew now that his family, the ones he loved so deeply, had to come first. "I'm going to turn it down," he said, his voice steady. "I don't need more money. I need more time." Turning down the promotion wasn't easy, and it wasn't without its own sacrifices. But in the end, it was the right decision. Jack found himself spending more time with his family, watching Noah grow into the young man he was becoming, and rebuilding the relationship with Emma that had felt so lost. It was slow at first, but with every day, the family began to heal. Jack's decision didn't magically fix everything, but it was a step in the right direction. The foundation of their family, once fractured, began to mend. Jack made a new promise to himself and to his family, a promise that no job, no amount of success, would ever come between them again. Time was precious, and he wasn't going to waste it. The years passed, and life continued to move forward for Jack and his family. They faced new challenges, as all families do, but they faced them together. The once broken pieces of their family had started to fuse together, stronger than before. Jack kept his promise, not just to his father, but to Emma and Noah as well. He was there for them every step of the way. Jack had become a constant presence in Noah's life, guiding him as he grew into a young man. From the early days of baseball games to the late-night talks about life and the future, Jack had done everything in his power to be the father his son deserved. And as Noah grew older, he understood the weight of the sacrifices his father had made. One evening, as Noah was preparing to leave for college, Jack stood in the living room, watching his son pack the last of his things. The room was filled with the quiet hum of moving boxes and the sound of Noah's footsteps as he moved about, but Jack could hear his heart pounding in his chest. This was the moment he had feared for so long, the moment when Noah would leave. "Noah," Jack said, his voice thick with emotion, "I don't think I ever truly told you how proud I am of you." Noah paused for a moment, looking up from the box he was packing. "Thanks, Dad. I know you've always been there for me." Jack smiled, his heart swelling with pride. "I know things weren't always easy, but I made a promise, remember?" Noah nodded, a soft smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "You kept it, Dad, and I'll never forget it." Jack's heart swelled with gratitude. He had given his son everything he had: time, love, support. And in return, Noah had grown into the young man Jack had always hoped he would become. The road hadn't been easy, but every struggle had been worth it. As Jack helped Noah load the last of his things into the car, Emma stood nearby, a silent witness to the moment. She had seen how far Jack had come, and she knew that this was a new chapter in their lives, one where they could finally move forward together. Weeks later, After Noah had settled into his new life at college, Jack found himself sitting on the porch, reflecting on everything he had been through. He had kept his promise to his father. He had kept his promise to his family, and he had become a better man for it. But there was still a sense of emptiness, a quiet longing for something more. It wasn't until one evening, when he was having dinner with Emma, that he realized what it was. They had rebuilt their family, but Jack knew that their journey wasn't over. There was still more to give. "Emma," Jack began, his voice steady but filled with determination, "I think it's time we start thinking about the future, about what comes next for us." Emma raised an eyebrow, her interest piqued. "What do you mean?" Jack reached for her hand, his grip firm. "We've given so much to Noah, and now it's our turn. I want us to take some time for ourselves, to travel, to do the things we've always wanted to do. We've earned it." Emma smiled softly, her eyes glistening. "I've waited for you to say that. I think it's time we make some memories for ourselves too." Jack's heart lightened at her words. Together they had weathered every storm, and now they could begin a new chapter. A chapter where they no longer lived for the promises of yesterday, but for the possibilities of tomorrow. Months passed, and Jack and Emma began to take trips together. They went to places they had always dreamed of visiting, but never had the time to. They reconnected with each other in ways they hadn't since the early days of their marriage. The years of hardship and struggle had not broken them. They had made them stronger. Meanwhile, Noah kept in touch with his parents regularly, sharing stories of college life and the lessons he was learning. Jack and Emma saw in him the legacy of everything they had fought for, a bright future, fueled by love, guidance, and the time they had invested in him. One evening, after a trip to the Grand Canyon, Jack and Emma sat on a bench overlooking the vast landscape. The sun was setting, painting the sky with hues of orange and purple. Jack wrapped his arm around Emma, pulling her close. "You know," Jack said, his voice soft but full of conviction, "I may have failed many times in the past, but every moment I've spent with you and Noah has been worth it." Emma turned to him, her expression tender. "We've made it, Jack. We've made it together." They sat there in silence, watching the sunset together. They had been through so much, but now, in the stillness of that moment, they had found peace. Jack had kept his promise, and in doing so, had given his family something priceless, the gift of time, love, and the chance to create new memories. 6 a.m. As the years went on, Jack's legacy became clear. It wasn't about the things he had acquired or the accolades he had earned. It was about the family he had fought for, the promises he had kept, and the love he had nurtured. He had taught Noah the importance of time, and in return, Noah had learned to value the moments that truly mattered. Jack's final gift, however, was something that would resonate for years to come. On the day of his passing, surrounded by Emma and Noah, he left behind not just memories, but a legacy of love, a legacy built on the simple but powerful principle that time is the most valuable thing we have, and it is the one thing we can never get back. As Noah stood by his father's side, holding the watch Jack had worn for so many years, he promised that he would carry it forward, not just as a reminder of his father, but as a reminder to always cherish the time he had with his own family.